How's it going, guys? My name is Valued, and today we're gonna break down 15 things that you need to be doing in Season 10. If you take the time to practice the things we talk about today, you will see massive improvements in your game. But without further ado, guys, let's get into the good stuff. So our first tip is gonna be one that people sleep on too often. Settings in Apex are literally the backbone to your ability to play the game. If your game is laggy, your sense is too high or low, or you're simply just not comfortable with your keybinds, this is going to play massively into your ability to play the game. Let's all be honest here, we don't change our settings every day. But if you haven't looked at them in a while, it's worthwhile and an easy way to improve very quickly. If you don't know which settings you want to change, we have multiple videos on the channel for controller and mouse and keyboard players. Alright guys, next up, we're talking about advanced movement. Movement is at the core of your level of play in Apex Legends. If you get caught in a situation with poor movement, you'll lose a lot of situations that you could have won. So many players underestimate how valuable a single wall bounce can really be. One wall bounce or tap strafe can be the difference between winning a fight and getting a ton of loot or getting sent back to the lobby. Movement is so valuable and honestly very underestimated by the average player. Most players that I run into personally, even in high ranks or pubs, have pretty poor movement, and because of it, they're an easy kill. So guys, if you haven't yet, brush up on your advanced movement skills. We have a ton of videos on the channel for this as well. Alright guys, before we go into the next tip, I'm extremely excited to announce that we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you to learn directly from the best player in the game. But why don't I just let Imperial Hal tell you a little bit more.
Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Imperial Hal and welcome to my brand new Apex class. This class goes over everything you need to move, shoot, and think like me. Whether you're silver or diamond, controller or keyboard, you're going to be the one carrying your friends. I typically can't get to all your comments, but this course is actually going to help you guys so much in all your questions. If you're serious about becoming a better Apex player, join me for the next 30 days and commit to improving.
All right, thank you, Hal. And now on to a tip that Hal actually talks about on his stream all the time, and that is don't overcommit. What I mean by this is a lot of people find themselves way too deep in a fight. Maybe you find yourself getting a beam on someone and you chase them really far. Little do you realize you now ran away from your team, potentially into their team. This is the #1 thing that I see lower level players do on a daily basis. To avoid this, simply just think about why you're pushing. Just because you do damage to someone, unless you physically get a knock, you don't always have to push. If they get too far away from you, they're almost always going to be supported by their team, and there's now almost no point in pushing them unless you know they're a solo. So in Apex, damage indicators are a big deal. Which options you choose for how your damage is presented to you on your own UI determines how you'll react to how much damage you do. For example, let's say you hit someone who has a purple evo for 132. This is great, it's a beam. But a lot of players get confused when the last shots hit for health damage. If they have a full purple evo and you hit them for 132, they now have 68 flat health. When it comes to the setting you should play, stacking is the move. Floating gets too confusing because you have to physically be doing math in a game. Also, since we're talking about indicators, turn off hit markers. They're no good in Apex because if you do damage, it's already presented to you by the damage numbers. So all the hit marker does for you is obscure your vision and block you from that valuable screen space. Alright guys, now we have one of my personal favorite tips. I use SKYNADES so often because they're a great way to get free damage or kills. So you might have heard us talk about this a few times on the channel, and the reason that SKYNADES are just better than tossing a nade right at your target is because they're silent. If you perform it perfectly with a frag, for example, the enemy will have almost zero time to react. And if you hit it right, they'll get knocked out of their cover into the open and take anywhere from 77 to 100 damage. And with a whiter blue evo, that's a guaranteed crack and a free push. And when you're really confident with these like me, you can toss a skynade, and if you know it's gonna hit, you can start closing the distance between you and the enemy to capitalize on that surprise damage. So now you might ask, how do I learn skynades? The best way is to go into the firing range and get comfortable with the arc distance on every grenade. The best nade to learn this with is the frag nade, because it's the easiest to do this with its 6-second detonation time. Arc stars and thermites also can be skynaded, but they have different detonation times and arc distances. So make sure you get comfortable with them all in the firing range, but start with frag nades. So we recently made a video about how to avoid damage in Apex. And let me tell you guys, it's a very powerful video that shows you step by step how to start navigating fights. One of the strongest techniques we talked about in that video was strafing and counter strafing. Having a good strafe and counter strafe in Apex is strong for multiple reasons. Let me just give you two. Reason 1, you gain the ability to dodge shots, and if you get really good at strafing, it actually makes controlling the recoil of your weapons easier. Reason 2, you also gain the ability to play a little bit riskier. If you know you have good strafing and overall movement, you can afford to make plays that some players simply can't. For example, let's say I walk into a 1v2. If I have poor movement and I just walk into both of them, there's a very low chance that I'm gonna beat them unless they just have bad aim. But if I have good strafing and movement, I now have the ability to be creative and take 1v2s. I can wall bounce past one of them, pull out my shotgun, and make their life a nightmare with my strafing. Then, after they go down, it's just a simple 1v1. This is just a small example, but it should highlight to you guys how important it is to get really good at practical movement and the flashier movement. Alright guys, so this tip is one for newer players and more intermediate players. Anytime you kill a squad, no matter when it is in a match, if your shield is cracked, you should always instantly shield swap instead of just healing your shields. Why, you might ask? Well, tell me this. How many times have you won a fight and then been instantly pushed by another team? Like me, your answer is probably a ton of times. The reason for this is when you're fighting, you're making noise. And depending on if you're playing pubs or low elo ranked, or even high elo ranked, people get attracted to noises for different reasons. In the ranks bronze to diamond, you can assume anyone who hears a fight, for the most part, is gonna come try to third party. And in pubs, the same mindset is true. Now, in Masters and Apex Predator, it's a little bit more complicated than that because power positions and zone movement comes into the thought process, but it's the same concept. So if you guys are gonna take even just one tip away from me, guys, once you win a fight, instantly armor swap if you're low on shield, wait around for about 5 to 10 seconds to see if a third party's coming, and if not, grab the most upgraded shield and heal it up. This is by far the best and safest strat around armor swapping and winning fights. So, with Apex having maps covered in buildings, you'll find that some of these buildings are copied from other locations. Knowing your way around these structures besides the obvious entrances will give you an edge against any team you're fighting near these buildings. Using certain ledges to climb to the roof to shoot through small openings is a great way of getting bonus damage on an enemy without taking much in return. Climbing to flank enemies while your team assaults a front entrance can open up a lot of opportunity to get an opening knock or fully wipe a team. So practice this during your games where the lobby seems to disappear and the map is mostly empty. Having lots of ways to get high ground quickly will never be a bad thing. Now, let's talk about doors. To many players, doors are just a way of entering and exiting a building. However, high elo players know that doors are a weapon that you can use to outplay multiple opponents or get safe information for your team. They provide a line of sight break, which for movement focused players can be a massive deal. If you're getting information, just crouch on the door and look through the glass sections on it. It can be hard to see, but it gives you a good enough view. Using doors to heal on will make your enemies panic and also buys you a few crucial seconds to get that battery off. Kicking a door immediately and faking a heal will oftentimes lead to the enemy kicking the door, which gives you an easy shotgun shot to start the engagement with. Doors are truly a multi-tool for the right player, so make sure the next time you're using a door, you think of these tips we just talked about. So, for any of you who don't fully understand what this is, let me break down what tilt queuing means. Tilt queuing is when you have a few bad games and something really frustrating happens in the last game. Instead of taking a short break to release frustration, you instantly queue back up. Now, it might not seem obvious to you at the time, but you're already doomed before the next game even starts. See, subconsciously, you have a mission in the next game. The mission is to prove yourself to others that you are too good to have whatever happened last game happen to you. This will almost always lead to you not thinking clearly about the game and trying to ego people, which will more than likely get you killed rather quickly. So next time you're tilted, guys, just take a quick break and come back in a couple minutes, and I promise you will play better. Next up, let's dive into making those long rotations with help from jump towers and vehicles. Lots of players tend to run across the map instead of using the tools provided to them to make quick and safe rotations. Jump towers can seem risky since people will see you flying, but they're worth taking most of the time to make up for the lost time in looting or late rotations. The same thing goes for Tridents on Olympus. On this map, they designed it to make less jump towers to force you to want to use Tridents to make rotations. Either one of these options will give you great mobility around the map, getting you where you need to go. So next up, we have grenades. When players start using throwables, it can be a big deal in their gameplay because the right placement for any grenade can change the tide of an entire fight. All the throwables have the ability, however, it's important to know which ones do better in certain scenarios. For example, frag grenades are great for rolling off a ledge to low ground or throwing vertically to make it explode without touching the ground. This grenade is also good for throwing at your feet on a door and then running away to lure the enemy inside. However, this isn't a good grenade for using mid-fight because of the timer. However, that isn't the case for the other two. Arc stars are fantastic for in-fight use because if you stick someone, it's almost a guarantee to knock that person. Throwing arc stars vertically doesn't work as well as frags because they have to land and then explode, where frag grenades just explode on a set timer in the air. Thermite grenades are perfect for taking down doors and doing some extra damage inside of a room once it's broken down. If an enemy team is behind a rock or corner, throwing a thermite grenade to the side so it burns behind gives them little to no warning and damages them a lot. It's a nice way to soften up your opponents. So, on to my next tip. Too many people do not warm up in Apex Legends. It's literally the best way to improve because you're training your aim, movement, and you're saving yourself that time of dying in your first few games to warm up. So guys, I'm going to keep this one short. There is no downside to warming up except the time. So make sure you start warming up in the future. All right, and finally guys, we have our last tip, which is widening your weapon pool. When it comes to Apex, we all know we're not going to have the best weapon every single game. Sometimes you'll loot a whole POI and leave with an unmodded Devotion with a Mozambique. And if you don't know how to use these guns, it means you're less likely to win your next fight. But getting comfortable with every weapon in Apex makes you lethal at every point in the game. Whether it's right off spawn or when you get rebooted and only find that unmodded Havoc, this tip right here is huge. So you might ask me, how do I get good with every weapon in Apex? Well, you simply go into the firing range and practice with every weapon that you're not comfortable with. And if you don't know the recoil of every weapon, then make sure to check out our recoil guide here on the channel, where we show you how to control every single weapon in the game, even the hard ones. Well, there we have it guys. Those are the 15 things that you can do better in Season 10. If you guys feel like we missed any major ones or you just want to add one in, be sure to leave it in the comments below because I truly value your opinion and it only helps us make better content in the future. Also, make sure you guys take the time to practice each of these things as you won't master any one thing overnight. Anyway guys, my name's been Valued. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.